The Man with No Face. The dense forest of Blackwood Hills was a place steeped in legend. Tucked far away from civilization, it drew only the most daring adventurers, those seeking the thrill of the unknown. Yet Blackwood had a reputation, one that warned of strange occurrences and mysterious disappearances. Locals claimed it was cursed, that something in those woods didn't want people there. Many went in. Not all came out. James and Laura, seasoned hikers and thrill-seekers, weren't ones to be easily deterred by rumors. They had trekked some of the most dangerous trails in the country, and the tales of Blackwood Hills only piqued their curiosity. So, when they set out on a clear autumn morning, backpacks loaded, they felt nothing but excitement. The trailhead was empty, just as they expected. Few ventured this far. The towering trees loomed overhead, casting long, shifting shadows across the path. The further they went, the thicker the forest grew, the sounds of nature growing quieter until the only sound was their footfalls on the soft earth. As the hours passed, they talked, laughed, and marveled at the beauty of the untamed wilderness. But as they ventured deeper, the atmosphere shifted. The air grew colder, the forest denser, and the shadows stretched longer. A strange silence settled over the area. Even the birds seemed to have fled. "Feels different here," Laura said, her voice cutting through the stillness. "Yeah," James agreed, scanning the trees. "It's quieter." They continued, pushing through the eerie stillness. As the sun began to set, casting an orange glow over the canopy, they spotted something up ahead. A man standing just off the trail. He was dressed in a worn brown jacket and jeans, his figure slightly hunched as if burdened by some invisible weight. From a distance, he appeared ordinary enough, but something about him felt off. His posture, the way he stood so still, made Laura's stomach twist with unease. James, ever the friendly type, called out, "Hey there, you lost?" The man turned slowly, almost too slowly. He didn't respond at first, just stood there, his head slightly bowed as if avoiding eye contact. When he finally did speak, his voice was soft, barely above a whisper. "Number not lost." James and Laura exchanged a glance, sensing the oddness in the man's demeanor. His face, though partially shadowed by the fading light, seemed wrong. It wasn't just the dim light playing tricks on their eyes. His features appeared blurred, like a smudged painting, out of focus in a way that made it hard to pinpoint any details. His eyes were particularly unsettling, small, dark, and avoiding theirs. "You camping out here?" Laura asked, trying to sound casual, though her nerves were creeping in. The man nodded but said nothing more. His silence, coupled with his strange appearance, gnawed at their sense of safety. Something about him didn't fit. He stood there, unmoving, like a statue. "Well, have a good one," James said, his usual confidence faltering. He nudged Laura and they continued down the path, quickening their pace. As they walked away, Laura glanced back over her shoulder. The man was still standing there, watching them, his head cocked slightly to the side as if studying them. A chill crawled up her spine. They set up camp as darkness fell, choosing a spot near a clearing where the sky was visible through the thick branches. They lit a small fire, the crackling flames offering warmth against the cold that had crept into the night. "That guy was weird," James muttered, poking at the fire with a stick. "Yeah, there was something really off about him. Did you see his face?" "It was like..." Laura trailed off, unsure how to describe what she had seen. "Like it wasn't there," James finished. "It was so blurry, like I couldn't focus on him no matter how hard I tried." They both fell silent, the eerie quiet of the forest pressing in on them. The fire crackled softly and the wind whispered through the trees, but something else lingered in the air, a sense of being watched. "Probably just our minds playing tricks," James said, though his voice lacked its usual certainty. Hours passed and the fire began to dwindle. Laura was just about to suggest turning in for the night when they heard it, a soft, steady crunch of footsteps coming from the trees. They both froze, straining their ears. The footsteps circled their camp, slow and deliberate, as if someone, or something, was pacing around them. "Is it him?" Laura whispered, her heart pounding. James grabbed his flashlight and stood. "Stay here." He shone the light toward the sound, but the beam only illuminated the dense forest. Nothing. The footsteps stopped. The only sound was the wind rustling the leaves. Suddenly, from the opposite side of the camp, another sound, a twig snapping. James spun, sweeping the light across the trees, and there, just at the edge of the beam, was the man. His figure was barely visible, standing between two large trees, his face once again blurred, his posture unnaturally still. "Hey!" James shouted, but the man didn't respond. He just stood there, watching. "Leave us alone!" James yelled, taking a step forward, but as soon as he did, the man disappeared into the darkness, vanishing as if he had never been there. James returned to the fire, his face pale. "He's out there, watching us." "What do we do?" Laura asked, panic creeping into her voice. "We'll be fine. Just stay close." They sat by the fire, backs to each other, eyes scanning the darkness. The footsteps returned, louder this time, moving faster, darting from one side of the camp to the other. And then came the whispers. Low, unintelligible murmurs carried on the wind, seeming to come from every direction. Laura grabbed James's arm. "We have to get out of here. We can't leave in the dark. We'll get lost," James said, his voice tense. "We wait until morning." But morning seemed an eternity away. The footsteps continued, growing more frantic, more desperate, and the whispers turned into hissing, disjointed voices that filled the air. Every so often they would catch a glimpse of the man, standing just beyond the fire's reach, his faceless head tilting unnaturally as he watched them. "James." Laura's voice trembled. "He's getting closer." The faceless man was no longer content to stand at a distance. Each time they blinked, each time they turned their heads, he seemed closer. Now they could see him clearly, his clothes worn and torn, his body thin and hunched, and his face, or lack of it, where there should have been eyes, a nose, a mouth, there was nothing, just smooth, blank skin. And yet, he seemed to be staring straight at them, seeing them with an intensity that was impossible to explain. They tried to stay awake, to keep the fire alive, but exhaustion weighed on them, and the firewood was running low. "I can't take this," Laura whispered, her voice breaking. "We need to go now." James nodded, his face set with grim determination. "Okay, we leave now. Stick close to me." They packed up quickly, their hands trembling, constantly glancing around to see if the faceless man had moved closer. The forest was pitch black, the only light coming from their flashlights. As they hurried down the trail, the footsteps followed, always just a few feet behind them. The whispers turned into low, guttural growls, echoing through the trees. Laura's breath came in ragged gasps as she clung to James. "He's following us." "I know. Just keep moving," James urged, his voice strained. Suddenly, Laura tripped over a root, falling hard to the ground. James stopped, kneeling beside her. "Are you okay?" Before she could answer, the footsteps stopped. Silence. Then, slowly, the sound of breathing, heavy, raspy, like something was standing right over them. James shone his light up, and there, only a few feet away, was the man with no face. He stood motionless, his blank face staring down at them, his head tilting from side to side as if studying them. James pulled Laura to her feet. "Run!" They sprinted down the trail, not caring where they were headed, only wanting to get away. But no matter how fast they ran, the man seemed to keep pace, his movements silent, his presence oppressive. Finally, they burst into a clearing. The sky was beginning to lighten, the first rays of dawn breaking over the horizon. But the footsteps didn't stop. The man was still there, lurking just beyond the edge of the trees, waiting. "We're almost out," James gasped, pulling Laura forward. But just as they reached the edge of the forest, the faceless man stepped into the clearing, blocking their path. He stood there, his head cocked to one side, his featureless face watching them, his hands slowly reaching out toward them. James and Laura froze, terror gripping them. The man took a step closer, then another. Suddenly, the first light of the sun broke over the treetops, bathing the clearing in golden light. As the rays touched the faceless man, he stopped, his body shuddering, and then, without a sound, he began to fade, dissolving into the air like smoke. Laura and James stood there, breathless, watching as the man vanished completely. The forest was still, the whispers gone, the footsteps silent. They had survived the night, but the memory of the faceless man would haunt them forever.